Traction draws you towards what you want in life, whereas distraction is what pulls you away from it. Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Funbi, aka the Fruitful Woman, and you are in the space of YouTube where we talk all things personal development and productivity, but from a faith perspective. Today we're going to be talking about distraction. I actually just finished reading a book called Indistractable. It was a really good read. It actually took me a bloody long time to read it because I kept getting distracted maybe, but I'm just trying to build the habit of reading in the evenings, and you know how it is when you're trying to build a habit. Sometimes you're really good at it, sometimes you're not, and for that reason it took me a long time to read, but I was so determined and I finally finished it. And you know what, it was a good read. And yeah, distraction is a big thing that hinders personal development, it hinders productivity, and I think sometimes we belittle it to just, oh, I got distracted and I'm on my phone, or, you know, I got distracted and I'm watching TV instead of, you know, working on this project. And while that is definitely a big part of it, I think it's important to recognize that distraction doesn't just distract you from a specific task, it can distract you completely from the path that God has for you. You can be distracted from the destiny and the purpose that God has for you. You could be on a completely different path and you have no idea because the enemy has distracted you so easily. And so I think it's really, really, really important that first we break down the word distract. So distraction means a thing that prevents someone from concentrating on something. What I thought was really interesting about this word is when you look at the etymology of it, the origins of the word and how it came about, it is a Latin word. Dis means apart, and trahere, which I think is where traction comes from, means drag. So it literally means like drag apart. That's what distraction means. So in other words, you're being dragged away from your task, or you're being dragged away from the life God has for you, or you're being dragged away from the purpose God has for you. You're being dragged away from the people that God has called you to. That is what distraction means. You know, it had me thinking a lot about traction and how traction therefore means that you are on the right path, and you know, traction is what we need to continue. And I always think of the imagery of like a train on a train track. There is a track for the train to go along, and if it comes off the track, that's when you see things like train wreck or crashing into other trains if it goes onto the wrong train track. And so traction draws you towards what you're supposed to be doing. It draws you towards your purpose, towards the task that you're supposed to be doing. Whereas distraction pulls you away. As women of God, as people of God, it's important that we learn how to stay on track and to become indistractable. If you have a purpose that is going to save people, save generations, save your family members, save your friends, if you have a purpose that is going to impact people positively, impact the world positively, the enemy is going to try and distract you. He's going to try and take you off that path. So you really have to be looking at yourself the way God sees you, that you are valuable, your purpose is valuable, and what you do with your time is therefore valuable. So you cannot afford to be distracted. One thing that I learned from that book is that you can't be distracted if you don't know what you're being distracted from. So for example, you can't say that a train is on the wrong track if you don't know what track it's supposed to be on. So what I'm saying is, you need to know at any given time what you're supposed to be doing. Only then can you say, oh, I'm being distracted. Only then can you know if something is taking your attention from where it should actually be. Sometimes we think, oh yeah, Netflix, that's such a big distraction. Social media is such a big distraction. But the reality is, if you set aside time to watch Netflix or set aside time to scroll, then you're not being distracted. Like, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in that time. So I think it's important that we define our time, define what traction looks like for us, so that we can then notice when distraction is taking place. You cannot call something a distraction if you don't know what it's distracting you from. So what might that look like? For example, if you know that you work a 9 to 5 and maybe you're working from home like I do, that's not the time to be cooking. That's not the time to be doing your laundry. I find that, you know, if that happens, you end up working late into the night, which is just so completely counterproductive, because then you're tired, you're grumpy, and things are just taking longer. When it's like, there should be a time for laundry, a time for cooking, and a time for doing your work. so that you're not mixing it up. Doing house chores like that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I think sometimes we only look at distractions as things that are bad, but they're not always bad. It's good, you know, to look after your home and do those house chores and things like that, but there should be a set time for it so that it's not distracting you or taking you or your attention away from what you're supposed to be doing in that time. If you have an important meeting and then you're coming there all flustered because you've just been cooking downstairs, like, how is that time in that meeting going to be fruitful when you haven't prepared for it adequately? Or if you're supposed to be hitting certain targets, you know, how are you going to be doing that if you're spending 3 hours a day doing things around the house? Another thing, you know, as someone who creates content, I sometimes will go on social media to look for inspiration, but then I just end up consuming the content and not actually like taking the inspiration that I need. In that moment, I'm doing the same actions, but I'm actually distracted from what I'm supposed to be doing. So distraction can look very, very different depending on the time, depending on who you are, depending on what it is you are meant to be doing at any given time. Some examples that you might want to look at in the Bible is, for example, Mary and Martha. Mary was at the feet of Jesus, whereas Martha was in the kitchen, you know, cooking, being hospitable and things like that. Being hospitable is incredibly important. But Jesus said to her, Mary has chosen the better thing. And I think it's important that we learn to decipher what is important in any given time. You should be thinking, what track should I be on right now? What is it that I should be doing right now? If the King of Kings, Jesus, is in the room, I should be at his feet, worshiping, learning, fellowshipping with him, not in the kitchen. And it doesn't mean that, you know, what's happening in the kitchen, being hospitable and all of that is not important. But again, there's a time and a place for everything. I'm sure after they, you know, fellowshipped and did what they did, they would have ate the food that Martha was preparing. So it's all important. It's just we need to learn to prioritize. Another example is when the Israelites were making their journey to the promised land and Moses had gone up the mountain to meet with God. And while he was gone, what did they do? They distracted themselves with a golden calf. They made a god with their own hands and they were worshiping it when they should have been waiting for Moses. And when Moses came back down, understandably, he was angry that they were doing this because it's like, you know, we know the God that we serve. We know the God that has just delivered this. How is it that you are so easily distracted? And again, that just shows you how distraction can actually take you down a really destructive path. You know, thank God they had Moses there to put them back on the right track. But if they didn't, maybe they would have never reached the promised land. They would have just stayed there worshipping a golden calf. So another thing that I learned from that book is to be more intentional about actually looking at why you're getting distracted. So there are two types of triggers that actually trigger distraction. There's internal triggers and external triggers. External triggers are probably what we're more used to. So these are things that are happening in our environment that are kind of demanding our attention. So for example, if I'm trying to record this video but I have the TV on in the background, I would probably keep looking at the TV to see what's going on because it's demanding my attention because of the movement and the colors and the sound. Or if you are at work and someone keeps coming up to you and talking to you while you're trying to draft something, that is an example of an external trigger, something that is external to you, something that's in your environment that is competing for your attention. An internal trigger now is something that's happening on the inside of you that is causing you not to want to stick to the task or stick to the track that you're on. And usually the aim of it is to seek some sort of relief. And honestly, when I read this, I was like, wow, like, that is so true. And the author of that book, he gave a task to do where it's basically you keep a distraction log. So maybe during your working day or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing that you need to be concentrating on, keep a distraction log and write it down. Every time you notice that you get distracted, write down, think about what is it that distracted you. It may be something external, but it also may be something internal. And then by the end of the day or the end of the week, for however long you do it for, you will have a list of things that like commonly distract you. So you will know what your triggers are. Maybe it's someone like a friend that keeps talking to you or calling you or texting you. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's your kids. And then if it's an internal thing, it could be that the task that you're doing is quite difficult. And obviously as humans, when something's difficult, we tend to shy away from it. And so you tend to look for something that's a little bit easier to do, like scrolling or talking to a friend. Another internal trigger is boredom. If you're doing a task that's repetitive and you're a little bit bored of it, again, that will cause you to look for something more interesting to do. Another internal trigger could be disconnection with the task. If you are not solid on your why, like why you're doing the task, you can feel quite disconnected. And for that reason, you just kind of feel like, why am I even doing this? And then you just get distracted. So when I was doing this log, I had to sit and really ask myself, okay, you know, why are you feeling, why are you trying to escape this task? And for me, a lot of the time when I get distracted is at work. Oh my God. And I realized that it is because, it usually happens when a task is like really difficult, a task where it's like, okay, you have to really like use all your brain cells here. Like you really need to think deep to, you know, be able to draft this document or to be able to answer this query. I feel like those are the ones where it just takes a lot of emotional energy. And so I try to escape it by maybe, you know, go and speak to a colleague or, you know, scrolling on Instagram. And so that was really insightful for me to know. And the reality is, no matter how difficult the work is, it's not going away. So I've just had to be like, okay, there's no point in getting distracted right now, because all that's going to do is elongate how long the task is going to take, which is further going to make you frustrated, which is going to further make it a not enjoyable experience. So yeah, since discovering that from doing that activity, I have actually been finding myself less distracted. So I think it's a really, really, really useful activity to do. And then with external triggers, I'm learning to actually remove the external triggers or manage them. So if something is distracting me noise-wise, I will put headphones in or turn it off, or, you know, close my door. Do what you can to like manage whatever that noise is or whatever the trigger is. If it's like people talking to you all the time, I remember when I was living at home with my family, and it was like during COVID where we're all working from home, and you know what it's like living in an African family. If you're visible, you ain't working, even though they can see you at a computer. And so, you know, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, they're all coming in and out of my room, and I'm like, this is making me work longer hours because you guys keep distracting me. And what I did is I put a notice on my door. I put a handwritten notice, and I said, guys, between the hours of 9 to 5, please do not come into my room. There's nothing there's no emergency, like it's not that deep. Don't come into my room because I'm doing work that is, you know, difficult, and I need to concentrate. And do you know what? They actually respected it. They actually respected it, and it really, 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 really helped. Another thing that distracts us a lot can be things like emails. I'm definitely that person that wants to respond to emails as soon as I receive them. And so if I get that banner that comes up saying you have a new email, I immediately want to check it. And now I've just turned it off. So I will not see that I have a new email until I actually go into my inbox and check. If something is really that urgent, they will call me. So yeah, those are some of the practical things that I do to kind of help me not be distracted. But yeah, just to summarize, remind yourself of why you're doing something. If you feel like there's some sort of disconnection with the task, reminding yourself of why will often help you rebuild that connection. Get rid of white space in your calendar. If your calendar is full with what you need to be doing, you know what's the next task. You have time to rest, or time to eat, or time to scroll or watch Netflix, then you're less likely to be distracted by doing that when time is allocated for something else. Spice up a task. If you have a task that you think is quite boring, I don't know, put a timer on where it's like audibly ticking down. That creates like a sense of urgency so that you don't get distracted. Or maybe if you're someone like I do, if I'm working from home and I'm doing something that's a bit meh, I'll put some lo-fi music on. I can't listen to music that has lyrics though, because I'll be singing along. So I put some lo-fi music on. Another thing that I like to do is increase the friction. So what this means is make it difficult for you to actually be distracted. So for example, social media is something that distracts me a lot. I love to scroll. So what I do is I have this app called Opal, and essentially it basically locks you out of your social media apps. Literally, that's what it does. So once that is on, it has specific times for me that it comes on, and once it's on, I can't get into those apps. And you can take breaks, but it limits your breaks to like 5 to 15 minutes. So even if you do get distracted, it's limited, and then you have to get back to work because it will lock you right back out again. So introduce some friction. So there's sometimes where I will open it and I could go and click for the break, but it makes you wait like a minute. And then you just think, oh, I can't bother to wait. And so you just don't go on social media. So introduce friction. I saw on TikTok some girl, she actually will tape herself to her chair because she's someone who likes to get up a lot. And she tapes herself to her chair. Now, obviously she can take off the tape, but that, when she tries to get up and that, you know, the tape pulling her back down, for her, that is friction enough to make her remember that actually I need to stay here and finish this task. So do whatever works for you, no matter how wacky it is. Pay attention to your internal triggers. Actually, like, do that activity, write things down, and actually quiz yourself. Like, why are you, what is it that you're trying to escape from? What do you need relief from? And actually deal with it head on. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, sometimes you just have to push through that feeling of wanting to be distracted. But, you know, we know that if we put our all into it and we focus and we give it our attention, we will, you know, get the good result, the good fruit at the end. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, not everything, you don't have to be happy about every task you have to do. So yeah, just be disciplined and don't rely on motivation alone. Oh, another good tip that I got from this book is to change your identity. So, for example, a vegan shouldn't really get distracted like by meat, because their identity is, I'm vegan. Like, most vegans will not be shy to tell you that they're a vegan. And so when you take on the identity of something, and what I mean by that is if you say things like if someone was to offer you chocolate and you say, I don't eat chocolate, and you genuinely mean it, like you don't eat chocolate, you're less likely to be distracted by that thing if you're on a healthy eating journey. So it's not necessarily a thing of, oh, I can't eat chocolate. No, I don't eat chocolate. So change your identity, like actually take on the identity of the track of which you're on, and you're just less likely to get distracted because you just don't see that as something that someone like yourself does. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Like when you take it on and you say, yeah, this is what I do, or this is what I don't do. And also when you say it out loud, people will hold you to account as well. Make use of accountability, talking of being held to account. And of course, last but not least, absolutely not least, it's actually the most important thing, is prayer. Like, there is nothing I will not say that you shouldn't pray about. Like, commit everything to prayer. If you find that distraction is a stronghold, if you find that you're really struggling with it, then pray about it. Submit it to the Lord in prayer. I do think that some of the things that we struggle with when it comes to productivity and personal development can stem from spiritual reasons, because the enemy doesn't want you to achieve what God wants you to achieve. Simple as that. So you will get resistance from the enemy, you will get distractions from the enemy, but we must resist the enemy and he will flee, as it says in the book of James. So submit it all to God in prayer. You know, if you're about to enter a session of deep work, say, Lord, I commit this time into your hands. You know, help me to concentrate, help me not to be distracted, and I believe the Lord will help you. So yeah, that's all from me today. I would love to hear from you. What tips do you do to help stop yourself from getting distracted? Do you struggle with distraction? What does it look like for you? And how are you dealing with it? So yeah, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please do give us a like. Be sure to subscribe as well, please. A lot of the people that watch this content don't actually subscribe. So please subscribe. It really does help us reach people just like you who would like to hear about topics like this. So yeah, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.